Now we're going to turn our attention to getting the motor mounted in the car and finish up the frame here. And what I've got here is I've got this piece of the 1/8 by 3/8 wood cut out here, and this piece should be cut long enough to fit inside the car between the bolsters and sitting on top of those little tabs we made in there. And then this piece here, I should take a measurement of it here. It's 1.7 inches long, and then this other one is cut to 7/10, so 0.7 inches long. And what I've actually got marked here, I don't know if you can see that, but this is where the tabs are going to come out onto the wood. And then this little mark, the second mark here, this is where the center of the motor is going to sit once we mount it on the under the car, with enough clearance in the back here for the tab. The wires, that will just tuck those in tight to the back. And what we're going to do is you need to cut some of that. If you don't have the brass strip, you need to cut a strip of brass. Otherwise you can just go buy a strip of brass. I just happen to run out, so I just cut this. And this one is I cut it to about 2.2 inches wide. And then this hole, I had the pattern in the drawing for the holes here. This center hole is about 80 thousandths, or 2 millimeters, I think is what it really is. And then I just drilled some number 63 holes in the end for the pins. If you don't have those Pico track nails that I use for these here, these little black didn't want to sit there. If you didn't have any of these Pico track nails, you can use regular push pins. They're just bigger. You just want to make sure that when you drill the hole for the pins to go through, that they can slip through those holes without a lot of friction. You don't want them tight, and you want them to be able to move around a little bit. So whatever you choose to use for these will be fine. You just got to make sure once you see how all this goes together that you have enough slop in it that it doesn't cause any binding. So go ahead and get your piece here set up according to the drawing, and cut these pieces of wood, and then we'll start to put all this stuff together here. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do here is when you mark out this piece of wood here, this hole I actually have is it's about 2.05 from this one end, so the motor's gonna be off. The motor pivot point's gonna be offset from the center of the car a little bit. And what I do is I mark that spot, and I take this, whatever strip you end up using and cutting for your crank arm here, and I lay it right over the center of that spot where the motor shaft's going to be. And then I mark both sides of it. And I know I've already done this, but I'll just do it again. And then what I do is take and then turn the crank back so that these holes for the door pins are almost to the piece of wood, just slightly away from them. And get it centered back over that mark there that you made, and then draw those lines also. So your piece should kind of look like that there. Now what we're going to do is we're going to cut the end of these other pieces so that we're actually going to cut out, and you can see this piece is cut to fit. I'll hold it on one side. from this line where this tab is with a little bit of clearance to the to where the motor is. But we're going to have to cut this piece of material out of this one here. So we can eyeball it a little bit here and adjust it later. So we're going to cut off this corner here. And we're going to do the same thing for this piece on this end. So we'll get those cut, and then we're going to glue them on top of this piece here. So go ahead and we'll cut that, mark that out and cut that out. Okay, I've glued my frame pieces together, stacked them just like this. So that'll be the frame section that sits inside the car body and completes our frame. Now we could have painted that at the time, made that earlier and painted that with the car, but I usually just paint this thing black. And I paint the motor black too. And if I had used white styrene in here, I'd paint all this black in here. So now what I'm going to do is we need to prepare this motor for mounting it in here. And now if you've made this out of brass, you're going to solder it onto the shaft here. I actually have made these out of some thick plastic, like 60,000 styrene, and just press fit the whole crank onto the shaft here. And it actually works really well. But since I'm kind of made most of mine out of brass, I'm just going to go ahead and make this one out of brass too. We got to get this shaft out of here, and you can just push it out of here if you got some way to push it out. I usually use my sensor press, but if you have any other means of pushing it out, you don't have to disassemble the motor, drill a hole, maybe in a piece of wood, and just push on the back here. But I'm going to use my sensor press and drive that shaft out of there. The second thing we need to do is we need to take and clip off these corners on the motor here, and to clear the bottom of the car. So I usually just go on the back side opposite of the shaft here, and I just clip off each corner, so it should look like that on the top. That'll clear the car floor. If for some reason it still doesn't clear, you can take and file these at a little bit of angle, but that should be enough clearance. Typically works for me for that to sit in there, and the frame will sit on top of that. So go ahead and we're going to get this shaft pressed out of here. I'll just use my my sensor press. Okay, well that was an interesting moment. I couldn't find my sensor press anywhere, and then so I'm looking all around my workshop to find out that the sensor press is actually what I'm using to support my camera. So I couldn't show you how I press that shaft off, but obviously just press it out one end, and then I soldered it on to the shaft, just like that, kind of at the bottom of those splines. And then I'm just going to take my Dremel tool. You can use a clipper or whatever and just cut off the extra here. Just like that. And then to push that back, just push it back in the motor. You can use your hands at this point or put it on the table and just push it back in there. Just making sure that you have some clearance for the crank in there. And what you want it to do is you don't want it to hit the bottom now in that pocket you've made, so I got to go a little bit more. It should sit right on there like that, and that crank should move in between those slots we cut in there. Basically what these slots are is this straight edge right here, this is your fully open stop. So when the crank moves in here, it stops against here, and it's not relying on anything else from the doors or anything to get it to stop. And then when the crank comes back, it'll stop against here. That takes all the stress off the doors and the door joints that we're going to make, which are actually pretty fragile. And so we just want the crank to have its own stops so the door feels none of that stress. So if you